This video will walk you through the stitches used to create the leader. So we'll start the leader with his trousers. I start with the white thread, making these triangle shapes. So here I'm using a satin stitch. And do remember to look at the other how-to videos, as there's a specific video on satin stitch. You see, with each triangle I start from the centre point and then work outwards. That's just a personal preference, and I find it an easier way to create the shape. Don't worry about how neat these look at this point. They'll look much neater once you add the gold edging and you add on the red chain stitch. As you can see, my first triangle does not look particularly neat, but when we come back later and see it with all the other details added, you won't notice that at all. So once you've finished all those triangles, I'll start to add in the gold thread. And all I'm going to do here is add long stitches on either side of each triangle. Now the gold thread can be a little bit annoying to work with because it can snag more easily. Just be patient when it comes to doing this section. You can see here in detail what I'm doing. So I'm going in at the top of each triangle and then back in down at the base. So once you've done all of that, then we'll take the red thread and we'll start doing the chain stitch. Again, there's a separate video showing you how to chain stitch. There's two methods, the link method and the loop method. Here I'm using the link method, but watch both videos, give each a go, and see which you prefer. So I'm going to follow down each of these red lines and the outline of his trousers in just one row of chain stitch. You'll find whilst you're doing this, you start getting into the swing of the chain stitch, and it's quite a satisfying stitch to do. I've found from other kits it always tends to be most people's favourite stitch. So once you've filled in all of that red, then you will have finished the trousers, and we'll move on to the belt. Now one thing to note here is, in this video I'm using the dark pink for the belt, but in your kits you'll actually use the middle pink. So again, I do the belt here using the chain stitch. I'm going to do a couple of rows of the stitch side by side to create the belt. And once you've done the belt, we'll continue using the chain stitch to add an outline around the whole of the outside of his jumper. You want to do it on the outside edge so that you can still see a bit of the printed scallop pattern when you've finished. So once you've finished the whole of the outside edge of the jumper, we'll then add in a line of gold thread in a running stitch. We'll add this right next to the inside edge of the chain stitch. Once you've finished doing that, we'll then start to put the French knots on the jumper. And I've marked on the fabric the positions for each of the French knots. Now there's a separate how-to video guide showing you how to do French knots, and you may find it easy just to watch this before getting going. If you've never done a French knot before, they can be a little complicated to begin with, or seem a bit intimidating. So I'd recommend getting a scrap piece of fabric and having a practice first. I'm creating quite large French knots here, wrapping the thread around the needle, maybe 4 times. But you can do it once or twice if you want to create a finer. So with all those French knots added, we'll move on to the band leader's baton. So I'm taking the dark grey thread, and you can see here I'm just filling it in with very long stitches. However, particularly if I'm going to make this into a hanging decoration, I don't want the thread to snag, so I add a couple of short little stitches from side to side over the top to secure the thread in place. You could stitch the whole thing in a satin stitch, working from left to right on the baton, which would equally look very nice. It would be a slightly slower. Now, as I'm going to end up putting the gold point over the top after, I'm just going to run the black thread the whole way up the baton and not worry about the fact I'm overlapping, because that will then be hidden by the gold thread. And so now that's in place, I'll start adding in these gold bands going across his baton. I'm just doing this in side to side, long straight stitches. And you can see on this one how I'm going over the top of the black thread. And once it's in, you don't see that black thread at all. If you do find you get any bits like that where the little bit of gold thread has come up to the front, afterwards you can just go through and with a sharp pair of scissors just cut it off. so don't worry too much about little bits of thread coming through to the front. So whilst I have the gold thread, I'm going to go on to do his crown. Now I fill this in using a running stitch, rows of running stitch. You can really fill it in however you'd like, but I think this creates a nice effect. What I'll show you here is how I do one of the points of the crown, and the same process then applies as you go on to do the others. Once I get to the end of each point, I'm just going to go around the pink, creating a loop around the edge of it. As you've got the yellow printed onto the fabric, if you've got gaps between any of these stitches, you won't notice from a distance. As you can see here, you've filled in all the gaps. So for the bottom section of the crown, we're going to outline this area in light pink using a chain stitch. And I've changed here and I'm using the loop method for the chain stitch. There's no particular reason, but you'll find once you get used to doing chain stitch that you'll start using both methods interchangeably. Go round and fill in the whole of this outline, and then what we'll do is we'll take dark pink and add a zigzag across the middle using a running stitch. So you can see this here, I'm just adding in this zigzag in some straight stitches. And now you're on to the final step, to add in his hair. Now I haven't marked the hair onto the fabric so that you can use your creativity and create any style you'd like. I like to stitch the hair in French knots. I think it creates a lovely volume, almost makes them look like they've got lots of ringlets. And I'm just going to work creating quite big French knots. I wouldn't worry about how neat each individual one is, because when they're all bundled together like this, it's all just about creating the illusion of the volume. And then, with the hair done, the figure is complete. Do get in touch if you have any questions which haven't been answered by this video.